back a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. So you still see new things in it?
I do, and I think, did I have that idea to do that? You know, so that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So start with energy, but yeah, thank you for the comments that I can see there. Yeah, it means a lot. It means a lot. So thank you, most definitely. But,
Yeah. I
so
think the chat will
maybe
come.
people are. I think people are probably mostly back now. So yeah, let's make a start, and then
Yeah. We have 2 questions in the
and then with the
Q&A as
queue.
well.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we don't have 2 questions. We have 2 comments in the Q&A. But if I could just bring people's attention to the Q&A. At the bottom, it says, ask a question. At the moment, it says there are 2 questions. They're not quite questions, but whoever wrote them, you can actually edit them into questions if you wanted. And whoever else wanted, you can also add questions to the ask a question at the bottom. And it would be, you can also vote and edit comment on questions as well. But I'm sure, you know, you can also keep them in the chat. But if you want a more structured way, look at the Q&A bit. Thanks for your comments. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Ruben. Thanks, Dana. Nice to see you all. Zen Rock. It is an amazing film. You're absolutely right. Well, let's talk about it. I mean, the beauty of having Shawn here, of course, is that you can get behind it and find out a bit more. Those are the layers, film festival style. So thanks all very much. Look forward to this conversation. We also have a special guest. Would you like to announce our special guest, Shawn?
No, the special guest will,
evolve.
Yeah,
we're all special guests. Special guest will evolve. Special guest will evolve. All right. So can we just start then, Shawn? Amazing film made in 1999.
Yeah.
I mean, how did it come about in the first place? How did that film ever get made?
So at that point, I was working for HTV, which is the ITV3, regional IT3, basically. So I was working there. I kind of had 2 roles in my job. One of my roles was working with young people. I used to run a production group for young people, training them how to do, script writing and camera and editing and those kind of things. And that was working with the drama workshop as well. And then part of my contract was also to make documentaries, to make films. And the first film I made with them was with Your Good Self. We made Under the Bridge, which was about Bristol. Actually, no, I'm getting it wrong. This is a sign of age. It's the other way around. I'm starting to rewrite history. This is the other way around. Actually, the first film I made was about the youth homelessness in Bristol. That was in 1996. I made that. And then when I got the opportunity to then make another documentary, I thought, you know what I really want to see on screen is this incredible story that at that point I didn't know the huge history of it, about His Majesty living in the city of Bath. And I'm from Bath, Bath born and bred, went to secondary school there. But all the time, I lived there for like 20 years, I lived in Bath. And in that time, I only heard sketches of information about the emperor living there. Do you know what I mean? I didn't get to talk about it in school. Local people didn't really talk about it or know much about it. I just especially when I started to grow myself, grow into Rastafari way of life myself, then certain people say, the emperor used to live here, but that's as much as they said, and it wasn't any more information. So then when I got the opportunity, I then pitched it to my producer at the time called Abigail Davis. And I said, you know what, I've got a story that I think will just make amazing television. I've never seen anything on television about it. So I pitched at that point it's called Emperor in the City. It was called, that was the first title. And first of all, they were like, really? Is that true? And I was like, yeah, Emperor really did live in these big people in the media, that didn't know the Emperor lived in the city of Bath. So they said, okay, that sounds interesting. Go on, research it, come back next week, and then let's see what you've got. So it wasn't committed straight away. They said, yeah, go and research it for a week, and then we'll make a decision. And originally this was going to be for half an hour of television on a Sunday, it's about 6:30, I think, 7:30 on a Sunday. So the following week, when I brought back all the stuff that I'd found out, they said, that sounds amazing. Rather than one half an hour, have 2 half an hours. So I had 2 consecutive Sundays. So the film that you've just watched is, the when you've taken out the adverts, it's then 50 minutes. So do you know what I mean? And people just like, and that was really for me when I really saw how inspiring the story is for lots of different people for lots of different reasons. Do you know what I mean? And so even though I was a Rastafari before making this film, this film really took me on a journey to where we even are today, really. Do you know what I mean? Definitely.
Must have been some week.
Yeah.
Come back in a week, because no doubt as well, I mean, there's a thing about commissioning, isn't there, where you might have the most amazing story in the world, but if a commissioner doesn't see it or doesn't get it, then it's never going to get commissioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, what was it about that time? I mean, that must have been some pitch. You must have felt a lot of pressure to actually, because for you said you were Rasta at the time, so that makes a difference into your connection to the story. You're almost too involved in the story.
Yeah,
which actually turned out to be a good thing, I think, in the end. But that must have been quite a week.
Well, yeah. I mean,
what did you find out?
I just sort of asked loads of people. I made a mini film myself, just to pick up a camcorder. I went to Fairfield House and filmed the grounds, filmed around Bath, put some music on it. I really went. So I made like a 3-minute promo in that week, as well as any kind of threads and bits of writing I could find. I went to the Evening Chronicle, the local newspaper, and found that information, and then kind of put just a scrapbook of information together. But that was the start of the research process, because researching the film, and I put what I did with the research was I put in a small just like a letter to the editor, and I just put information needed about Emperor Haile Selassie living in the city of Bath, and just from that one little column inch, just got a deluge of letters and phone calls. That wasn't in that week. That was afterwards when I'd started the research properly. But it just opened up a floodgates of information. Do you know what I mean? And that was like, wow, now we're really onto something. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, there's so much in that. I think because those contributors, I was going to say, where did you find those people? I mean, you've got some great elements of it. There's the visual, kind of the child's eye view around the city. There's Benjamin's pieces, but the real richness of it are these actual eyewitnesses who were children at the time and people of Bath, which to me makes a real HTV story. I mean, I guess that must have been a real blessing, having those people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, making this film was the first time that I had seen and heard white English people speaking about the emperor in that way. I'm used to Rastafari speaking about him in that way for obvious reasons. But then hearing, Bath's quite a conservative place, and interviewing, white English elders about the emperor and having tears in their eyes, and the memories were so poignant to them that even when they happened to them at 5, 6, 7, 8 years of age, they still remembered it like it was yesterday. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, that was something that's really struck me, was just the energy and the potency and the affection that those people spoke was just incredible, really. And yeah, Benjamin is fantastic, having Benjamin involved. And this is where, can I ask Bunny, our engineer, to activate? So hopefully this will work. But Benjamin's just so gracious with his time. I first contacted Benjamin when I was still a student, so it was a couple of years. It's a good 5 or 6 years before I made this film. It was the first time I made contact with him. And having him on board for this journey and this research was just a real blessing, really. So yeah, it's definitely the start of a good journey.
And when you One thing I was thinking about.
Hey, look who's in the house.
Looking younger. That's Benjamin.
Welcome, brother Zephaniah. Welcome.
Pleasure's mine. Pleasure's mine. Am I allowed to talk?
Well,
yeah.
Rob's the host. I let Rob do the MC.
No,
so.
Please feel free. You look like you want to just unfold.
I've watched the film so many times, and like Shawn, I mean, I always find something different in it. But for some reason, just watching it now was, for me, really emotional. And I think maybe it's because I've matured more politically. I know more about my history. Even when we were 20 and 25, we think we know a lot, you know what I mean? But there's a part in there where I talk about, I'm not sure if I talk about it actually, I think somebody, I think the woman talked about it, how the view looked like the view in Hara. Well, I went, and I mean, I've been to Ethiopia a couple of times, and I only went to Shashamane once for a few hours. I spent most of my time in Hara. Hara is a unique part of Ethiopia. 1/3 Christian, 1/3 Muslim, 1/3 Jewish. Original Jewish. And it's a walled city. And when I just watched the film, it occurred to me, yeah, it does look like Hara. It really does. You know, and it didn't, I didn't notice that before until I just watched it again. And maybe it's because now I'm kind of older and wiser, and I just kind of treasure my memories more, you know. And you know, it's one film that I've made many, or presented, unlike Shawn, I'm not really a producer, presented many films in my time about many subjects, everything from, you know, politics to, I'm doing football at the moment and all kinds of things. But that's the film that internationally I get recognized for.
Okay.
I mean, I go to Jamaica, people see, I've been to Japan, people say, Emperor, you know, people just know that film. And I have to be really honest, right? When Shawn said, you know, will you do this thing for me? I thought it's going to be on HTV. A few people in Chippenham are going to see it. Right? I mean,
yeah.
You know what I mean? I remember we talking about, you know, when it was half an hour and then it was another one, and we were like, wow, 2. Yeah. And I thought that was it, you know, it's going to be shown on HTV.
Exactly.
And we're going to talk about it. And some people are not going to believe us.
Yeah.
Sit them down and actually take out a camcorder.
It's true. I mean, it was the longest film that I'd ever made at that point. Do you know what I mean? So, and it was actually the first film I produced, because I directed and produced it. So I was like, oh my gosh, do you know what I mean? And I tell you what, the thing that's made this film go international and last the time it's had is actually because of pirates. And I'm thankful for the pirates. And I have to say this publicly, because I was bound by a contract. Do you know what I mean? So every bit of archive footage in that film cost HTV £8 per second to use. We paid British Pathé and Movietone News. So it wasn't a cheap film to make, just from the archive. So I couldn't do anything with this film after I'd made it. I was like, one transmission on TV, and that's it. So you're absolutely right. It was going to be a Chippenham, Trowbridge, Bath, Bristol audience for one time only. But the pirates, they videoed it. They got it on VHS. They did it online, and that's what got it out there. And I'm grateful. I'm very grateful for that.
I remember you gave me a copy on VHS, and I was talking to somebody afterwards, a while afterwards, and they were saying how much they loved the film. And I was saying, well, I'd give you a copy, you know what I mean? But he said, no, man, if you want, I can fix you up with a copy.
Yes,
I can. But the other thing about the film, I have to say this, and I think it strikes me now, because, I mean, I was pretty well traveled at the time, but I'm obviously more well traveled now. and I just understand international politics and diplomacy more. Sometimes in some arguments about politics and culture, there's a grey area. It's not black or white. But I think that we who follow the emperor, we can say we were right. You must understand, well, you know this, right? And it's mentioned in the film. When Selassie I came to Britain, the state didn't want to know him. You know, and it's interesting that all his references are to the people. As I'm watching the film, I realize it's always about the people and the everyday people that he connected with. And there's a kind of hypocrisy. I don't want to put a damper on things, but there's a kind of hypocrisy when the Queen says, I would like to think that England will be a place that you will always feel at home. Well, she didn't say that a few years before.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? The hypocrisy of it. Yeah, and they treat His Majesty as if it was the first time he was coming here. He was technically a refugee. And that's another thing we have to all understand. People think of refugees always as poor people, boat people. I've got a friend who's a refugee, he's a billionaire. You know, when people need help, they need help.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that and learn that lesson in this time. Government can do one thing, but we as people have to connect. What emperor, king, queen, whatever, have you seen that connects with people so much? It always went on about the people. I mean, there isn't one. And another thing I just want to pick up, just say before I shut up. Sylvia Pankhurst, who was like a leading revolutionary feminist. I know one of her offspring, Susan Pankhurst. She and the emperor were like that. That's another. There's a fascinating story there, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
About that. This leading feminist and freedom fighter.
Definitely. I'm glad you mentioned that because this event is a part of a festival that we're putting on. And on the 2nd of August, we've got a talk about Sylvia Pankhurst.
Oh, okay.
In friendship with the Emperor. So thank you for seamlessly plugging that one. Because it's true. I mean, that's the thing about this history that is, it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper and so multi-layered. Do you know what I mean? That is a bottomless well, really. How rich, the years that his emperor came here and the impact on it had is just like an infinite well of information, stories, inspiration.
I remember when I was naughty, and I was hiding from the Babylon in Chippenham, and people used to tell me, this is the 70s, so Rasta is on the rise in Britain. And these people used to tell me that the emperor used to stay not far from here. And I said, yeah, really? And later on, I got to understand the story. I also made a very short film. Well, I presented a very short film for local television in Birmingham about the day that Selassie I stayed in Malvern.
Right, yeah.
He actually stayed in a hotel there. I went into the room there. And made a short film about that. I'm not quite sure, I can't remember exactly why he was there. Was he traveling around England or whatever? But he stayed in this hotel in Malvern. Do you know the story?
Yeah. His granddaughters were at school in Malvern.
Yes.
So he used to go to the Abbey Hotel.
That's it, yes.
I got a big up Ayman Isacher. Ayman Isacher is in the audience.
Oh, yeah.
Work with yeah, you know him. He's your brethren as well.
Yes.
He's done a lot of work with the Abbey Hotel and their blue plaque that they've got there. So, the pie man. I mean, definitely. But we're.
Can I just check? Just pick up some questions. I didn't mean to cut you off there. Sorry. Did you want to make your
point
there?
No, come to you anyway. That's fine.
Oh, okay, cool. I was just going to say, Footsteps of the Emperor, not the original title, but the title it became. There's a question in the Q&A about the Emperor being exiled in Leeds. I don't know if there's any to that. There's another question in the chat about being in Southampton, and someone says about a sequel. I mean, Footsteps of the Emperor is the perfect title for a series, is it not?
It is. I mean, Just to address Leeds and Southampton, I haven't heard those particular examples. Keith, who's here, Keith Bowers, he's going to be giving a talk next Monday about other sites that His Majesty went to. So Keith would have more of that research, but His Majesty didn't live in those other places, but he did travel and stay in a lot of places. Do you know what I mean? So Weems Castle in northwest Scotland, he stayed in Weems Bay, Swansea, Wimbledon. Do you know what I mean? There's lots of places that His Majesty travelled to and stayed, and people have got those memories. But Fairfield House is the only place that he bought as his private residence and actually lived in, kind of thing. So, but in terms of sequel, lots of people have asked me about a sequel, and you know, in a way, it's an interesting question because I've done so much work on this history. I mean, this is 1999 I've done this, and I continue to work with Fairfield House every day since then. Like, you know what I mean? So, you know, and that's involved in the radio station and the gallery and on the committee. So it feels like I've made a million films about this. You know, I've written, you know, I'm an academic and I write academic articles about it. So I feel for me personally that for another film, I'm interested in a up and coming filmmaker, as I was when I made this film, taking on that mantle and making a new film with their energy, with their vision. I don't think it's a job for me now. I think it's the next generation film to come in with new insights, really. And that's my honest answer about the sequel. I know lots of people wanted me to make a sequel, but I don't think it's my job now. I got to hand that one over.
I think another film can be made, but we shouldn't call it a sequel. Whoever makes it. You know, exactly. I think that film stands alone, even though we know it was two films.
Yeah,
right? That film stands alone as a film, and to make Footsteps of the Emperor revisited or whatever you want to call it, no, I think that's it. There is a lot more to be said about Haile Selassie in Britain, the times, Rastafari movement, all kinds of other things. But like you said, it's probably for another generation. You could do it as well, but I don't think you have to think of it as a sequel.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think I would be, in a way, do I have to make it with a similar aesthetic? And do you know what I mean? I think, you know, I think it needs a fresh energy needs to come to it.
You need a new presenter.
Is that no? You didn't read the small print. You're still in contract.
I mean, is this what the Festival of Learning is all about? Which is something, Shawn, you've been the architect of, and it's like you say, is that connection between when you first come upon your weeks of research for Abigail Davis versus your work you've done every day since then. And now, today, we are launching something called Freedom in the City. Tell us about that then. How does that extend the story?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Freedom in the City. So it's playing on the title of Freedom of the City, which was the award that His Majesty got in 1954. So Freedom in the City is a festival of talks, events, symposiums, running from today. Today's the first day up to October. And, you know, this is the only event really that I'm kind of speaking at in a way. I'm chairing some of the events because the crucial thing about this history is that there's lots of knowledgeable people out there that do their own research, that aren't in academia. You know, like I say, we got Ras Benji giving a talk in May about the mystical connections between Bath and Ethiopia. You know, Keith's doing his talk next Monday about his book, Imperial Exile. Iop Derillo is giving a talk this Friday about St. George. This Friday is St. George's Day in England, 23rd of April. And St. George is the patron saint of Ethiopia. So there's a whole, you know, and he works at he's an Ethiopian art history historian who works at the British Library. So he's going to be doing a talk about that. So I know absolutely there's such a rich history that's untapped. So the Festival of Learning is about now giving other scholars and other historians of this history the opportunity to share that knowledge and share the research that they've been doing. So there's a lot going on. We're bringing an opera, Juan Ogombi, composer. He made a opera called King Solomon and Queen of Sheba. And His Majesty is the 225th descendant of Solomon and Sheba. So that opera's coming to the Guildhall in July. So that's going to be fantastic. Do you know what I mean? So there's a lot of stuff going on. And the chat,
I mean, in the chat,
of some of the information.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hope everyone can read the chat okay. You might have to press a button. There might be some little number or something next to it. There's ask a question which says 5, and chat may say more if you haven't got it open. But there's a rich body of links there which relate to the events for this. There's also, you can come back to it if you haven't seen the film, or sorry, I think someone said to me that their film got cut off in the middle. So if you haven't watched all of them, you can go back to it. If you come back to this link, go to the chat, it'll all still be visible to you.
We won't change the password. We'll let you watch it.
Yeah, I'll give you some space to do that before changing the password. So, and so this, I mean, to me, this is the extension. This festival is the older man extending, becoming the kind of cultural impresario around the story of the Emperor's Day in Bath. Is it not, to some degree?
Definitely.
So there's all that. Can I just ask, because I was having a conversation the other day with a friend who had heard for the first time a Rasta speak about Haile Selassie and the Emperor in a very passionate way. And I think they were quite taken by the power and the passion in that connection. I mean, just this is kind of a backward question slightly, but for both Benjamin and Shawn, I mean, Benjamin, you're going to come to this 2-bit town and make this 2-bit film thing on someone's video VHS camera. And Shawn, you had to kind of convince your life away in a week why this is important. Why, for each of you, was this a really important film to make?
Shall I start and then come to Benjamin? For me, being someone who grew up in a city of Bath, which is predominantly, not a black city, but we do have a very small black community. But, I was the only black child in my class, one of 4 in my year group, one of which was my cousin. So to have this true historical, moment of an African emperor, an African empress, and the princes and the princesses come to stay in Bath in the 1930s, and I'm a Rasta. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if I don't make this film, then, do you know what I mean? It felt like it had to be my film to make, really. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like the stars are aligning. I'd already been to film school at that point, come back, you know what I mean? At that point as well, I was living in Bristol, but my family have always been in Bath, and I've always got one foot in Bath. You know what I mean? So for me, I couldn't let this moment go, because it would have been if I don't do it, then I'm going to regret it for the rest.
No one will.
Do you know what I mean? So I had to step up to the plate, really. And like I say, it's the biggest film and the film with the biggest budget. I'm not embarrassed to talk about the budget of the film, because in television, you get a it's a factory of in terms of there's a formula. So for every half an hour of screen time for documentary, for those Sunday slots, you had £11,000. So for 2 slots, I had 22. The big majority of that went on the archive material. Do you know what I mean? But then we had camera crew and sound crew. Do you know what I mean? It's a television crew, lighting. You got all that kind of stuff. But even though we had that budget, it wasn't a cheap film to make at all. So, but I just thought, what? I can't remember what age I was at that point, but I just had to step up to the mantle and grasp it, really. Do you know what I mean? How old was that?
27?
27? Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. So I knew I'd regret it. So, yeah.
Benjamin, why did you come to this 2-bit town despite everything? Why was this film important for you to make?
As Shawn said, I never called it a 2-bit town.
I'm just ramping it up for the sake of the question. But like you said, it didn't look like a big ambitious thing, but you thought it was important to make. Why was that?
Yeah, I'm just going to answer a question that somebody's put in the box there, actually, about have I ever referenced Bath in my poetry. I don't think I have, actually. Unless I've been doing children's poetry about the Romans in Britain and stuff like that. But the reason why I thought it was important it was important on two fronts. One was the telling of our own story. And I'd been, at the time, as I said, I was doing lots of presenting for, stories that were kind of interesting, but not a really personal connection to me. They were jobs, what I was doing for the BBC or whatever, But this one had a real personal connection. So I really wanted to tell our story. And the reason why I felt it was really important was one of kind of knowledge of self, but probably more important, and I take it that some people will disagree with me on this, probably more important was the fact that there are a lot of people who were not black, who are not Rasta, who just, this is completely out of their radar. And to have it on, although it wasn't national, it was regional, but it was primetime TV. Preaching to the converted is quite an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
But when you reach out to people who have no understanding of His Majesty, you hear the rumor saying His Majesty was dripping with gold and riches, and then you hear these stories from white people saying he was struggling. This is the truth. The truth is he was selling his jewelry.
Yeah.
He was living in a crammed house. I mean, it's a royal house, but it's a kind of typical refugee house, packed with members of his family and his entourage and whatever. So for me, that was the important thing. It was working with Shawn. At those days, to put it bluntly, I just cannot really remember working with a black producer or director. And if I did, I can think of one or two, and they were complete. Their whole ambition was to impress white people. You know what I mean? But this was ours.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I really loved about it. This was ours. It's been made the way we wanted to be made. Shawn had to send it to me, and we kind of shared ideas. But that's what you see on screen. And like I said, it's one of the films that I get most recognized for, especially when I move in music community, Rasta community around the world. But for me, it was also the importance of showing it on primetime television to white people who had a very warped idea of who Haile Selassie was and what Rastafari is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah. That's so true. I mean, even the preaching to the converted thing, and I think that's one of the things since working with Fairfield House since then, about, we're doing a lot of work to work with the council to take on board Fairfield House and to make it secure. So we're having to do a lot of community engagement work with local people, local businesses, local residents, inviting them into Fairfield House so they can see the beauty of the space. And every day is like that, as you say, Benjamin. It's not about preaching to convert. The faithful come, and we're grateful for that. Absolutely, we never take that for granted. Then seeing people that don't know anything about His Majesty come into Fairfield House, and you see their eyes light up because they just don't know this. It's like, wow, really? And we see that recognition on the Rastafari faithful that come. And they're filled with that beauty and that energy, the Ethiopian community, and also the white English and the Bathonians. And for me, there's a saying that the Lion of Judah prevails all unity. There's this figure that, we're under this banner, we all just human beings united. And for me, I see that at Fairfield, and I think, yeah, so it's always going to be with me. You know what I mean? From that day one, it'll always be with me. So it is my second home, Fairfield.
I'm kind of. I have to ask my question. I want to ask Benjamin a question. Phil's laughing because I queued it up on it. So I want to ask Benjamin this question. And I said, we were saying, well, do you ask it? How do you reconcile the imperial aspect of His Majesty, given your very public rejection of the Imperial associations with Britain
Yes.
in 2003.
Yeah.
4. How do you
Well,
reconcile?
you see, for me, the imperial aspects, if you like, is just the job. The job of politics, of running a state, and all these kind of things. The connection to the lineage of Solomon, for me, is the most important thing. So I actually, this may sound like a contradiction, you know, I'm very critical of monarchy, especially monarchs that want kind of absolute power, and monarchs that have no respect for their people. And I believe that, and I'm somebody that's kind of, met many people in Ethiopia on different sides of the political spectrum. Met some people who are related to Haile Selassie. And there's some people that wouldn't say this, but I'm happy to say this. I'm not happy to say this, but this is the truth. I do believe that whilst in government, there were some political mistakes that Haile Selassie made. But I wouldn't make mistakes. I met Nelson Mandela, and a good friend of Mandela, and I tell you, there's some mistakes that he made. That is politics. But that cannot take away from the connection that Haile Selassie has to our cultural and spiritual roots. Yeah. Like I said, Nelson Mandela is somebody I hold in high esteem. I remember having a big argument with him once in my office. I was on the phone, he was under the phone. And we ended up slamming the phone down. And I mean, there were some South Africans there, and they were like, do you realize you've almost slammed the phone down on God? You know what I mean? But we had a completely political view about a friend of mine who was a poet, who was a friend of both ours. And I said to Mandela, you're making a mistake. And he did make a mistake. He admitted it later to me. Selassie, as he was in government, you're making judgments all the time. People, the West are trying to play one country against another. You know, there's all these kind of political games going on. And so you are bound to make mistakes. What is important is the intention. You know, and Selassie, not only did Selassie care about his people, he cared about the people of the world. When he went to United Nations, he wasn't just speaking about Ethiopia. He said, if you let this happen to us, it's going to happen to you. You know? And so that's my answer to that question. You cannot, I've always said, you know, I met the Queen, I've met most of the top royal households, you know, when you perform at the Royal Albert Hall, they come and meet you and whatever. And I'm involved in charities where the Queen is involved and stuff like that. They can't help the family they're born into. But I do criticize the institution of monarchy and the privilege they have. And I couldn't imagine, well, I don't know if I should say this, but I couldn't imagine many European royal households connecting with their people in a genuine, sincere way that Haile Selassie did.
Thank you for answering that in such a very deep, considered, measured, and honest and open way, because it was a challenging question to ask, and I think it's an important question to ask, though, because I think I see in ourselves many contradictions. I think one of the interesting things, if Selassie's first prophet was Garvey, then the next prophet, in my limited understanding, would be Bob Marley, in a way, if you like, in terms of global impact and global understanding of Selassie. But I think if there's an empire that the emperor actually still has, is the One Love Empire, which actually sees a lot of people come together under a monarchic idea. So I do also find that a bit contradictory myself. It doesn't seem like a monarchy in the oppressive sense of the way. It's as I think Philip Bond was calling it, a righteous monarchy or something like that. But for you, that's a really clear. So it's a spiritual connection primarily, and it's of the spirit rather than of the world, as it were.
Yes, and the lineage, if you like. But also, not also, slightly different subject. At the moment, I'm making a radio program. All you people who are listening, don't tell anybody because, we haven't made it yet. I've just started to make it. It's about the funeral of Bob Marley, right? Coming May, it's 40 years, right? Now, there was a big fallout at that funeral. People don't really talk about this because the 12 Tribe Church wanted to control the ceremony, right? But Bob had said that he wanted to be baptized by the Ethiopian church. And he was baptized by the Ethiopian church. And the 12 tribes and other churches, houses in Jamaica thought that he was turning his back on Selassie I. He didn't answer that question, but he said he's going to be baptized by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and he was, which is why there was a lot of tension in the wedding. And I've seen footage that is not available to the public about the tension that was going on underneath. So I'm not really answering the question, but it's just when you mention Marley as a prophet, towards the end of his life, he looked towards the Ethiopian church and he was baptized a Christian. This is a reality.
And as Ayman's just put in the chat, the name that he was buried as was Haile Selassie.
Yes.
That was Bob Marley's name.
On that dimension, sorry, Shawn, thank you, Benjamin. That's the good up sort of heads up, or they say, or whatever, and it's good to sort of look out for that. It's a fascinating story. Shawn, on the spiritual dimension, the Freedom of the City Festival has 3 strands to it. Well, 4, if including radio stuff. But the Queen's is one aspect. Queen's story is one aspect. The Emperor's music is now as an aspect. But the whole hallowed halls bit. So, given what Benjamin just said about the spiritual connection, the Mali and which religion, so why has that been an important part of this festival program as connected to the Emperor?
Well, the Hallowed, so just so people know, so yeah, the festival, Freedom of the City Festival, has got these 3 themes, and Hallowed Halls is one of them. And Hallowed Halls really kind of reflects that spirituality and culture in Ethiopia and also in Rastafari are kind of entwined. Can't kind of separate them. Do you know what I mean? That is there in the DNA and the spirit and the blood and the skin and the smell of this liberty. With Rastafari, we call it a liberty rather than a religion and a way of life. And Ethiopia is the same in terms of the spirit, the connection with all elements of the divine. There's the religious theology there, but even in just terms of how you live, how you carry yourself, how you speak in everyday life, spirituality just seeps through everything. So that's why the Hallowed Halls kind of theme was in this festival, because the spiritual and the religious meant so much to His Majesty. At Fairfield House, they built a chapel, as it said in the film, and it's made from a greenhouse structure. And Ras Benji, who's given a talk on the 14th of May about the mystical connection with Bath in Ethiopia, he was the leading light in terms of building a sacred garden at Fairfield House, where the chapel once was. So the greenhouse is no longer there, but Ras Benji, just incredibly with his brethren, colleagues, have built an amazing, beautiful, tranquil, meditative space at Fairfield, where people can now just go down, relax, meditate. So the Hallowed Halls is just really important. It's not to be embarrassed by spirituality, not to be embarrassed by mentioning God in this kind of this day and age, and in certain professions. I work in academia, university, and there can be a real silence when anyone wants to talk about anything to do with religion, spirituality. Do you know what I mean? There's there's certain sectors of society now where you just don't have those conversations. Do you know what I mean? But that's why I've noticed. It's really important to not shy away from that. This isn't a Rasta festival. It's not an Ethiopian Orthodox festival, but the energy and the wisdom and the knowledge seeps through all of the events, which are directly to do with that, and also others that aren't really. So, don't know if I answered your question.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much. That was a fantastic answer. Thank you. I mean, I don't know if Benjamin, because actually Benjamin, you introduced the whole thing about spirituality anyway, and I think that was kind of how we got onto the subject. But no, thank you. I don't know. I mean, I've got other thoughts, but before I do that, I just want to say there are 20 minutes left before we absolutely have to cut off. So we'll close off in about we'll close off. We have to close off, let's say 5 minutes maximum before that. We can close off now if you want. So if there were any other questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat or in this Q&A thing. I don't know if this is a real question. Is there such the Eddie Hazel? I don't know. I don't understand. Is that a real question? I don't understand that. Sorry, question, and maybe rephrase it. We talked about the footsteps and the different places that the emperors traveled around Britain. There was a question in the chat. I think Benjamin answered it, but I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on it, which was about when did you first find out about the emperor's stay in Bath? I know you said that's when you were in Chippenham, when you were lying low in Chippenham. But I mean, I guess you could probably elaborate on what impact it had on you, I guess.
Well, at the time, to be honest, I mean, when if I remember correctly, this is going to sound terrible, but if I remember correctly, when I first heard about it, I thought it was just I thought it wasn't true. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm in Chippenham. It's like, I went there because there were no black people there at the time, right? I'm like hiding out, and somebody said to me, "Oh, you're Rasta. Well, there's a place where Rastafari stay down the road." And I'm like, what? Yeah. So I kind of didn't really take it seriously. And then there was a time when I used to spend a lot of time in Bath, in Bristol, I beg your pardon. And you remember, Shawn, I used to do gigs with, there was that community centre, Hepworth Road, was it?
Yeah, Kumba.
Yes. The local bands that you used to have there, we used to do gigs all the time. And I performed at the kind of Bristol Carnival and stuff like that. And then I started to kind of hear more about the connection. But still, I never saw it. And then I realised it was real. How did I feel? I guess I love when something is tangible, you know. And I think I'm reading a really interesting book at the moment, controversial book, but by somebody I really admire. And it's called How Jesus Became God. And it talks about Jesus growing up and what Jesus really felt. And it shows the evidence. It's not just, and it goes and it shows how the Bible is put together, why we have them called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John when they weren't written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all this kind of stuff. But the writer is a really good writer, Bart Ehrman. And I'm fascinated by knowing, you know, there is real evidence that Jesus went to Galilee. Going to Galilee was like going to Milton Keynes. You know what I mean? It was the most uninteresting place. There was no work there. All you could do there was fish. It was, probably Milton Keynes is probably not a good example, sorry. You know what I mean? But it wasn't the most sexist place. It wasn't the, you know. Why did he go there? All these reasons. This is what the book explained, you know. And I like both stories, those human stories. So I knew that Selassie I came to Britain as an exile. For some reason, I never really thought too much about where he went. But then when I learned, and I said, right, that makes sense. And that's just a real connection. I have something which I'm very proud of. I think have you seen it, Shawn, my medallion?
Yeah.
So I think some people who are probably in the room know about this. A friend of mine, well, say a friend of mine, I beg your pardon, I never met him, but somebody who used to kind of admire my work. His job was to fly Selassie around when he was doing his diplomatic work. And Selassie I gave him a medallion in a little royal box. He gave it to me. You know, and I've put it in the Rastafari exhibition at the Black Cultural Archives, and I put it in a couple of other exhibitions. And I'm just so proud of it. I touch it and I go, Selassie I held this, you know. I like things that are tangible. And for a lot of people in Britain, you know that thing, you know, what has the Romans ever done for us? What has Selassie I ever done for us? While he was here, he was part of us. It's not academic, if you like, from one academic to another. He was here. This is a place he left for us. This is tangible. We have evidence. You know, and I can't remember what the question was, but that's the answer.
Quick point of information, by the way. Don't put your phone numbers in the chat, but we can get rid of that. But if you want to, yes, info@houseofhismajesty.com to get involved, find out directly about what's happening in Fairfield House, please. Thank you for that, Benji. Sean, you said you can answer the maggot brain question.
The maggot brain question, yes, so that's about the music. Funkadelic, George Clinton. Yeah, it's interesting actually, because I don't remember exactly why I used that piece of music. I just knew the vibe fit. And whenever I make a film, I've got Natural Mystic that Bob Marley's Natural Mystic that happens in the graveyard scene with Blattinger Hailway's grave. But we've got Dread Flintstone in there as well. And I gotta just like the vibe. And for me, when I'm making a film, I have to go by the vibe of the visuals, the vibe of what's being said. Is it a sad scene? Is it, that kind of thing? And it wasn't a conscious decision to not have reggae throughout it. But at the same time, I don't want to be, that felt too obvious as well. Do you know what I mean? As Benjamin said, His Majesty related to all cultures and all people. Do you know what I mean? And so there's certain moments where absolutely, reggae fit. But then other times I wanted that guitar solo that's in Maggot Brain, because it's just an incredible guitar solo that has this huge amount of emotion. And where I used that music was when Ruth Haskins, peace be upon her, she passed away at the end of last year. God bless her. But she was talking about the moment where His Majesty was crying when he was listening to the audio of the battle happening in Ethiopia. And she said it's the saddest moment she's ever seen, and she really felt for the emperor. So it was a very sad moment, and so for me, I needed a music that had that level of emotion in it, and so, I already owned the album. I already knew that music. And for me, it fitted with the integrity of that moment, really. Do you know what I mean? So, I've another film I've made with you actually, Rob, when we made Under the Bridge, about Bristol and transatlantic slave trade. We've got different music in there. I can't remember exactly what now. We've got Porter's Head. We've got different music in there that just gives a different energy and a feel. So for me, when you make a film, it has to be to the integrity of the scene and what's going on in the story, not just being tied to a different particular genres, if you like, really. So yeah, thank you for that music pop question.
Yeah, excuse my cultural ignorance. Thanks, Zen Rock, for clarifying. I mean, Emperor's music is one of the strands. I don't know, Benjamin. I mean, I don't know how much you know about the festival necessarily, but I mean, do you know anything, or would you say anything? If given, I'll tell you what, the Emperor's music, discuss. That's just a wide brief for you then. Because it's one of the strands of the festival learning. We've got this Queen Stories, we've got the Freedom of the City, Queen Stories, Hallowed Halls we spoke about, Emperor's music being another one. I mean, I'm sure Sean could describe, but I'm just checking at you, Benjamin, to say if you've got any thoughts on the Emperor and music at all.
I don't really. What do you mean? What the music that Emperor would be listening to?
Yeah, or maybe music inspired by. I mean, that's probably easier. That's reggae. That's pretty much the whole of the reggae canon, isn't it?
I remember many years ago making a film, presenting a film called Crossing the Tracks for BBC. And it was about multicultural Britain. And there was this Rasta band, but they just played rock music. I mean, real kind of rock music. And do you know a band called Bad Brains?
Bad Brains, yeah. I mean, they're heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I never worked with them, but they're another band, they're kind of heavy punk band. But His Majesty, I mean, we call Jamaican music, reggae music, roots music, and of course it does appeal to our roots. But again, we have to understand it's made with electricity. To get the bass that we feel, we need electricity to make that music. And so, you know, how far do you want to dig down? I'm one of these people, if you look at my music collection, and because of my age, I still have CDs and vinyls. I have everything from roots to classical to rock, you know. And so I don't think we should be stereotyped by the music we listen to either. If you're making a film and you feel that, hey, there's a music that works really well with this, but I'm not going to do it, you know, because it might not. People might think that I like Mick Jagger. Well, if Mick Jagger makes a bit of music that works with that visual, I mean, I don't make films as such, but then so be it. You know, we must not be. I remember growing up in Handsworth in Birmingham, and it being very Jamaican. It was like St. Paul, you know what I mean? Very, very Jamaican. And I mean, my father's from Barbados, my mother from Jamaica. I knew Jamaica better. But lots of the people who were from Barbados and whatever, they all used to kind of put on the Jamaican, you know, because Jamaican was like...
I'm Bajan. I can do a better Jamaican accent than I can do Bajan.
right. Jamaica was just the dominant culture. And I remember kind of, when I was a youth, listening to Calypso with my Jamaican Rasta brethren around me, being moved by Calypso but not wanting to show it. And I was like, what am I doing, you know? Listen, all music come from Africa, you know? All music come from Africa. Doesn't matter, even the classical music, the European music that they call classical music. So we must not be ashamed of being able to embrace whatever music we want to embrace. The great thing about reggae is that it carries history with it. It's very educational. It has a very special feeling. But there's other qualities in different other kinds of music which are also very relevant and valid.
Yeah, I co-sign that 100%. Definitely, I love it.
We've got a few minutes left. I mean, maybe Shawn, you want to just do a line about the music, but could you also, before we finish, just flag up a headline about what the Queen's Story strand's about as well before we end? But do you want to come back on the music? Just to clarify about music as far as the festival is there?
Yeah, I think it's important to come back on the music. One of the most recent research projects that I've been doing is around the Emperor's pianola. You know, we've got a pianola in the house, and a pianola is an automated piano. So it's got these music scrolls. So you put them in the front, you press the pedals, and it goes automatically. And so I'm fascinated by so we've got the music scrolls at Fairfield House, which the royal family used to listen to. And as Benjamin said, it's classical, there's waltz, jazz, ragtime, you know, these are all kind of 1930s music, you know. So I've been really interested and fascinated by that. And part of the festival, we've commissioned 2 musicians. One of Cleo Rose Lane, she's Jamaican Welsh, and her husband's Moroccan, and all their music's a real kind of fusion of different styles. You know, I guess you could say it's reggae at root, but it's a different fusion of different styles of singing and beats. So they're going to be producing music inspired by this history, inspired by you know, different stories that have come out from the pianola as well as throughout the festival. And yeah, we've got talks about you know, Rastafari music in terms of Nyabingi, because a lot of people don't know that Nyabingi is actually what you would essentially call you know, indigenous Rastafari music is the drumming, the Nyabingi drumming, and we don't, you know, you don't really hear much about that.
And you know, Nyabingi was a Ugandan woman.
Yeah, Queen Nyabingi. Yeah. Yeah.
I was talking to the poet the other day, and we were doing a kind of interview together. People were interviewing us both together, and he's from Uganda, George the poet, and he was blown away. He didn't know it, and he was just like, "I'm Ugandan, and I didn't know that." And he said he heard the word, and he just never knew it, and that's what we got to do. Each one teach one.
Absolutely. No,
we're going to get hard cut off in 5
so start wrapping up.
Queen stories very quickly. Speaking of Nyabingi,
Queen stories. There's another strand called Queen Stories. So we've got a range of different events. So we've got which I mentioned earlier, the King Solomon and Queen of Sheba, because Queen of Sheba was queen of the area, Abyssinia, that area, which His Majesty is now descended from. So on the 17th of July, we've got the opera coming to the Guildhall. As I said, drew on the composer of that, so that's going to be live performance, COVID willing, if we're still out and about, but also going to be recording the opera, and then that's going to be screened on the 31st of July. We've also got a symposium around Queen Stories, a local creative director called Christelle Pellicure has done a lot of work around the Queen Stories, and there's going to be an event in August. Is it August? There's so many dates in this, I need to memorize them all. But it's going to be looking at the different women in different leadership positions, and particularly in Bath as well, looking at Black women in leadership positions. And Asha Craig, who's the deputy mayor of Bristol, she's going to be doing the keynote talk, and she's a Rastafari deputy mayor in Bristol. So yeah, there's a lot going on. So the link will be put in the chat in a moment for where people could find out the information, and we're going to kind of release the bookings kind of bi-monthly. We're going to be putting all the events in there. But it's going to run till October. There's a huge amount going on. So thank you. Queen Stories, 27th of September. Yeah.
No, thank you so much. So it just remains, I think, to say thanks. Ras Benjamin, I think that Ras is probably the best title we can offer you. Prince, indeed.
Professor. We also
Royal One.
give credence to the Professor.
Well, I'm just glad. I mean, I was just on Twitter today and I saw it, and I just went, wow. We just connected, so I'm glad you invited me on. And
are you both professors then? Yeah.
I'm an associate professor. Benjamin's a full professor.
Oh, and I'm a no professor.
He's a real thing, you know what I mean?
I'm not complaining. I could be the student.
My mum just said I'm a naughty boy, and I just remember
that. I am wisdom itself.
Yeah.
Well, look,
thank
professors.
You, it's much appreciated. Definitely.
Yeah, real, honestly, brilliantly. Thank you so much. Real honor, pleasure. Thank you indeed once again for coming to this 2-bit town called Bath and Bristol and everything else on the online version.
I'm gonna back up a red clip.
This is just, dramatic, just jazzing it up a little bit, conflict, But honestly, I think it's been enlightening. A lot of people have said in the chat, I've seen the film lots of times, I get something from it every time. Even the filmmaker himself said that, and the contributor himself said that. I think it's true. So it's really nice to hear the wonderful comments, and thank you everybody for their time. Thank you, Mr. Bunny and Jennifer, for behind the scenes, and Shawn for putting this together as well. Benjamin, really, honestly, real honor to have you on, and a real pleasure. Definitely feel like whatever titles you may or may not have, you have my honor, and people in this chat for definite, you're up there as far as honors are concerned. So thank you very much for all you've done. And that's it, really. So look out for other events. We're going to be hard cut off in the next
Bunny, the technical master behind the scenes.
I did thank Bunny and Jen.
And Jennifer as well, yeah. Jennifer.
Yes, so thank you all. But we will be hard cut off. So before that time happens, it'd be nice to say a full goodbye rather than goodbye. Yeah. So this is it. The Freedom in the City Festival of Learning is officially launched. And yeah, anything else you want to say, Shawn or Benjamin? That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming. Just thank you for the audience. Do you know what I mean? For being there. No, definitely. So yeah, look forward to the journey towards October. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, thank you.
Increase the peace.
Increase the peace.
Thank you very blessings.
All right. Thank you, Bunny. You're there.